This is Rhett Read Podcast.
We take a deep dive into the Fear Street series
And review other books we've read.
I'm Serge.
And I'm Anna.
We're happy you can join us.
Welcome back.
Today we're going to talk about Fear Street, The Dare, but before we get into that, we have some recently read books we want to share with you guys.
We or I?
Anna is the one that's actually read a book recently. I have not read a book in like 2 months.
So I've read a few books, but the one I'll talk about is There Are Monsters Here by Cameron Chaney. We actually heard about Cameron Chaney via BookTube. He's one of those few booktubers that actually reviews books, and his specialty is horror books. And you can find him on YouTube as Book Movie Guy and by his name Cameron Chaney. But he also wrote a novella. Well, it's like a short story. It's 35 pages. I don't know how you classify it, but he calls it a novella, and it's called There Are Monsters Here. It centers itself around a boy, and then later he becomes a man. And it's all about monsters, and the monsters that follow us as people. But the thing is, in the book, he describes the monsters as like little actual monsters. But the monsters are more like allegories for the things that we consider monsters in our lives. Like maybe our anger, or our depression, or alcoholism or something. Or it could just be actual monsters. The way that he writes the story, it's beautifully layered in that you could read it straight up as people with monsters that follow them, and how the monsters affect their lives, how the monsters rule their lives, and how ultimately their life events are dictated by how they react to these physical monsters that only they can see. You can only see your own monster, you can't see anyone else's monster. But you could read this book at another level. They aren't actual physical monsters, it's just a physical manifestation of the actual monsters within us as people. Everyone has that, I don't want to say darkness, but everyone has something that they don't like about themselves. And how they live their life based on this thing that they don't like about themselves, your life can go very differently based on how you compose yourself, how you show yourself to other people, how you let the inner workings of your mind come out. This novella really beautifully shows you the different paths your life can go down via this allegory, or I don't even know what you want to call it. You can read it in so many different ways, or you could read it at another level of external forces that are beyond your control.
So are there actual monsters in the book?
There are monsters, but like I said, they could just be...
Like, are they scary,
so
horrific monsters, or are they cute little pocket monsters?
Some of those pocket monsters are pretty scary looking. They're scary monsters because the monsters that we have within us are scary.
Mm-hmm.
If we let that being within us come out, it's pretty terrifying. I mean, it's either the physical manifestation of the worst part of ourselves, or it's an actual monster. Or it's that one thing that affects us, that we, it could be a mental thing, it could be a physical thing, it could be like the genetic thing, but it's like physically manifested, or it's just like how you see yourself. Like, you know how some people have synesthesia? So they see colors for sound or taste or something. This could be a story about a child that sees monsters in place of emotions or bad things. Or it could be a story about a child or a family who uses the term monsters as a way to describe the negativity in their lives. Like, oh yeah, it's your monster. Everyone has a monster. Anything we say would really just take away from his beautifully crafted novella. It's short. I've read it twice. I read it a few days ago, and then I read it right before recording this podcast because I wanted it to be in me again. And it's really, really well done. And for 35 pages, it makes you think. I'm still thinking about it, and it's only 99 cents as an Amazon Kindle thing, so it's well worth the purchase. It's really great, and I hope that Cameron decides to write a novel, because I would really read that, because this kind of blew me away. My complaint is it's too short.
But we've read so many stories where it's too long.
Right.
So, at least he's not going the Joe Hill route.
That's correct.
Of writing up to a page limit and then getting bored and his prose turning to garbage. So,
Right. This never does that. It's so well crafted, and I'm still thinking about it. And it's honestly, there's so many levels that you can read it at. This is probably perfect for like dissecting. It's actually like a really good little horror book because of all the ways you can interpret it.
Are there any buses in this book?
You want to tell people what buses are?
Yeah, I just learned about buses this week. We were watching Mark Kermode's
Secrets of Cinema?
Specifically the episode about horror movies, which is his favorite genre, apparently.
I think he wrote his PhD thesis on horror movies.
For those of you who don't know, Mark Kermode is a film critic from England.
Yeah, he does the BBC 5 radio show with Simon Mayo on Fridays, and then you can find it as a podcast. It's the Wintertainment podcast with Mark Kermode and Simon Mayo. One of my favorite podcasts. It's probably one of the first podcasts I listened to.
Well, going back to horror movies, there is this trope in horror movies where you get a scary scene, builds up a lot of tension, you're waiting for that jump scare, and then like it doesn't come. There's nothing bad happens. The prototypical scene for this is a scene in a movie where a woman is walking through the park and it's misty and scary and you expect her to, I guess, maybe get attacked or something. But
well, she's being followed the entire time, and the movie is like some werewolf, like cat werewolf movie. Mm-hmm. So the entire time you're expecting her to be attacked by like a cat werewolf thing.
But then all that happens is she gets to the bus stop and her bus comes.
But the bus, as it's coming off screen, you hear like this screech sound and she gets really, really nervous, and you think at that moment she's gonna get attacked by the cat creature, but it's actually the bus that needs grease or something because it's just...
Right, and then so that's a bus scene, and that happens a lot in horror movies. But the thing is, like, once you find out about it, you can't unsee it, and suddenly you start seeing buses everywhere. For example, we're gonna talk about later, in Bad Dreams, which is the Fear Street book we're about to talk about, there are buses pretty much at the end of every chapter. You know, we looked at some other reviews online, and there seems to be a consensus. This one is particularly heavy on the bus. R.L. Stine's kind of known for this sort of scene. He did a lot of this kind of thing. In the Dare, the little...
fantasy cuts?
Yeah, the fantasy cuts. The first one was definitely a bus. After that, you already know what it's going to be, but the first one is like, that's a bus. You think, oh, this is horrific, and then, oh, it's just her imagination.
I mean, he tries to add that bus element in all his books, like at the end of every other chapter, I'd say, and none of them land particularly well. It's just his thing. Because it's a horror trope, suddenly you understand, oh, okay, because this is such a horror trope, because this is something that happened, he is trying to incorporate this horror trope within his horror books.
Yeah.
But it's the difference between executing poorly and executing well.
Or maybe it works better in movies and not as well in a book.
Watching that episode of Secrets of Cinema about horror did make me think about the Fear Street books, because I was wondering, why don't these books really land well with me horror-wise? Because the only thing that horrifies me about reading this book is, like, the writing, right?
It's a Love Actually reference right there.
The Fear Street books, you know, some of them are okay, but some of them are just... So when Mark Kermode was talking about all these different tropes in horror movies, I noticed that, you know, R.L. Stine does try to use a few of them, including the bus, but they don't land well. And another thing that Mark Kermode talked about, and he talked about this for sci-fi movies as well, is the importance of audio and the ambience, sort of, right? You know, when you think of a movie like Gravity, there's the silence and how important the silence is, but also the sounds that were used and the music that's used. And then when he was talking about horror movies, specifically, he mentioned a lot of horror movies, how there's a certain melody, you know, minor key kind of grading off kilter chords that are in horror movies. And if you think of Halloween, like everyone knows the that was Halloween, right?
I don't know. I've never seen a Halloween movie.
Okay. It's either Friday the 13th or Halloween. Sorry, guys. But the thing is, like, music does play such a role in so many key scenes, or the lack of sound.
I think the strings from Psycho is the one that's really iconic and everybody knows. The violins during the stabby stab scene in the shower. Yeah.
Right. It's the sound and how you do it. And a good writer needs to be able to, like, set up the scene, set up the tension, but, like, put all those sounds and music and noise in the writing for you to be able to get the same emotion while reading the book as you are watching the movie.
I'm sorry, are you trying to say that his horrible writing is similar to, like, the off-key, like, minor key music that's supposed to unsettle you? You become so unsettled by reading his crappy prose that the horror element really comes through as a result?
No.
Oh, okay, that's...
What I'm saying is that what you need is a good writer to be able to set that scene up the same way that a scene is set up in a movie. And R.L. Stine isn't known for his setups. First of all, he's not known for getting really intricate in order to get someone like so absorbed and focused on something, because just he has so many of those jump scares that you have in movies. Like, you know how when a movie has too many jump scares, you're just numb to them? That's kind of what he does to his books. He's not like letting that slow buildup of tension happen. The only time that ever happened was for The Best Friend. That was the most unsettling of his books to me. Another thing Mark Kermode talked about was, remember how he mentioned that a lot of people think of those jump scares as creating fear within the audience, but what it's actually doing is releasing fear. The audience is already like getting this fear built up within them, so when that jump scare happens, that fear just comes out of them. R.L. Stine doesn't do that build up well, because when the jump scare happens, you're just rolling your eyes like, but why is this happening? This doesn't make sense. Teenage Scream, which is a great point horror podcast, their favorite thing when they talk about R.L. Stine is this time when someone opens like a storage closet door and they're like, oh my god, and then a body fell on me. And then you flip the page to the next chapter, it's like, oh, it was just a mop. What?
Yeah, that's typical R.L. Stine.
And I think
that's the bus.
Yes,
right,
exactly. And his buses are poorly timed. I think a good writer can do that thing with like the music and the sound and the ambience and like the releasing of fear, but you need to like craft it well. You know, it's like knowing when to let the bus come.
He has some successes. I think the Cheerleader series had moments here and there where you do feel the suspense building up. I know when they're going into the competition and they're all getting into that formation, you're yelling at the book like, don't do it. Don't do it. The evil spirit's gonna like cause you to freeze up or do something and someone's gonna get injured. You see them sort of marching towards their like inevitable doom and you fear for that. So he does it right sometimes, and other times it just falls completely flat.
There's flashes, right? But you figure we've read, like, what, 30 some of his books already? Yeah. Like, I'd hope there are flashes, or we would have quit already. So that does make sense that, oh, that's why we're still reading it.
Well, that and we created this fan theory of ours. We gotta keep things interesting any way we can.
But I don't really think there are buses and there are monsters here. I think maybe there's one scene that I would classify as a bus, but it's one of those things that it's like done so well that it's just like you absorb and you're like, oh, okay, that happened.
Is it a well done bus? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm so used to like, oh, it's a fantasy. Oh, it's just the dog. Oh, a leaf fell and brushed a person's hair. It wasn't like a bloody finger from the tree. Like, you know, it's not something like ridiculous. And what's interesting is Cameron is also from Ohio.
Huh.
That's, There Are Monsters Here by Cameron Chaney. Check out his YouTube, Book Movie Guy, and find him on Twitter, Book Movie Guy. And yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend.
Awesome. And on that note, we'll be talking about Fear Street Bad Dreams right after this intermission.
Let's talk about Fear Street, Bad Dreams.
As usual, we're going to go through our prediction accuracy. I'll start it off. I was basically looking at the cover, and there are two scared girls in bed together. So I was thinking, all right, there's going to be a girl having weird sleep paralysis kind of nightmares. And she's going to try to get her friend or maybe sister to help her with it. But what happens is her sister then gets dragged into the weird dreams too, and I bet it's going to tie back to some weird guy who is preying on the girls. Murder weapon, gun, murder victim, male, and female murderer were my predictions. And yeah, I didn't do so good. I got female murderer. I got that one right. That's about it. I think her first dream was a sleep paralysis because she described being unable to move while the events of the dream were happening or something like that.
True, she did.
I got two things right.
Okay, I think you're reaching there. I think she's talking about in terms of that bad dream. Mm-hmm. You know, aka a nightmare. Would Fear Street nightmares not have worked or something? Okay, anyways.
So I think actually nightmare, the word nightmare comes from sleep paralysis. Because people would have this dream where a horse would appear in the middle of their room and it would be standing on top of them and they couldn't move because the horse is so heavy. So the word nightmare actually comes from reports of paralysis. I can't believe you're fact checking me. Come on, why would you fact check?
Well, the word nightmare is actually derived from the Old English word mare, which is a mythological demon or goblin who torments others with frightening dreams. And then they added the prefix night to stress the dream aspect. And the word nightmare is a cognate with the older Dutch term Nachtmare and the German Nachtmar.
Obviously, I was totally BSing you, and you saw right through it.
Well, I thought it'd be interesting to figure out the etymology of the word nightmare, because R.L. Stine couldn't figure out that, instead of writing bad dreams, he could just write nightmares. But I said that it's about a girl who's having bad dreams, and they're coming true, from creepy spiders to accidents to murder, and that didn't happen. I said she dreams about her own impending murder or that of someone close to her. Whatever. I said the murder weapon would be strangulation.
No.
I said the murder victim would be female.
Yep.
And the murderer would be female.
Yeah, you got me on murder victim there.
When I said that they're coming true, I mean, it already happened, so technically it already came true. Just saying.
Yeah, from the point of view of the protagonist, they're coming true as she finds out more and more about how it already happened, I guess. So yeah, I'll give you that. So the plot synopsis, really briefly here, the Travers move from the North Hills neighborhood to the Fear Street neighborhood after the death of Mr. Travers. In their new house, Maggie starts having a nightmare of a young woman being murdered. As unsettling as this is, it's not as bad as the horror that's happening in Maggie's real life.
Dun dun dun. And who's Maggie?
Maggie Travers, she's a 17-year-old girl with long red hair, green eyes, high cheekbones. She is described as being tall and thin.
She's the star on the swim team. She gets good grades, has a hot boyfriend, and she says that she's 5'8", because that's an important thing to know about her, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
She has a younger sister, Andrea, who is 16 years old, and she looks really similar to Maggie, but on her, these features don't quite fit right. So her red hair is actually just shoulder length, but instead of looking really gorgeous and long and full, it just looks limp and straight. And then she has these broad shoulders, and she's short, so she just looks stocky.
Right.
And in R.L. Stine's, writing, if you don't look pretty, then you're just a hag and an ogre, and you have a shit personality. And we have Andrea, and guess what? She has a crap personality. She also clips out magazine articles and puts them in a shoebox, and they're all about, losing weight and getting self-esteem, but nothing changes without an attitude change, girl, because she has a crap attitude. And the thing about her, crap attitude is that, so she's not popular, but because she was in the North Hills neighborhood, she really just sort of ensconced herself into that community and became, this horrible snob and looked down on anyone who wasn't part of that country club life. And because they've moved to Fear Street out of North Hills, she's screwed. That snobby group of friends, guess how they see her? And now she just needs the kindness of the people she's been snubbing for years.
Yeah, we're now her neighbors.
Why did she move?
The reason they had to leave the North Hills is because Mr. Travers actually recently passed away due to a stroke while working at the office. He was an insomniac, and his one trick to falling asleep was reading a boring book with a nice hot cup of cocoa. We also have Mrs. Travers, who is the widow of Mr. Travers. She believes in the knowledge and wisdom of animals, and at times can be kind of spaced out, but is also a total cleaning machine, and, she turns that frightful Fear Street house around in no time.
The most important member of the Travers family is obviously Gus, the golden retriever. He's the best character in the book, the most important part of the family, and honestly, we're just done with this book because Gus is perfect. I just end it there. But no, his favorite place to snooze is the rocking chair that Mr. Travers used to sleep in.
Aw, yeah, that was cute. Then we have Justin Stiles. He's Maggie's boyfriend. He is 6 feet tall, blue twinkling eyes, captain of the baseball team, and a track star.
Well, was he about to make the Olympic team?
Now that other guy's out of the picture, he might have better chances. I don't know.
I don't think that's how making the Olympics works.
No, well, apparently that's how swim trials work. So anyway, moving on to Dawn Rogers. She is the number 2 person on the swim team after Maggie. And they are actually, good friends, but they're very competitive with each other. And she's described as having long blonde hair.
Next up on the swim team, we have Tiffany Hawlings. She's a soft-spoken girl with dark frizzy hair and large almond-shaped eyes. She's a good swimmer, but she's only 3rd after Dawn and Maggie.
And then we have Martha Randall, who is the swim coach. She is your typical R.L. Stine coach. She's described as being tall and stick-thin. She made it once to the Olympic trials as a teenager, and she is now in her 40s.
And then you have the neighbors to the Travers, the Averys. You have Milton Avery, who's an old man, and he has skin like old paper. and he's bald except a fringe of scraggly white hair, and his wife Claire Avery. She has a round moon face accentuated by a halo of thin white hair.
And that's it. Those are the characters in the book. So let's move right along to the in-depth plot analysis. All right, guys.
So we start off with the Travers trying to find their new house on Fierce Street. They're completely lost driving from their ex-house in the North Hills.
This is funny, too, because we've seen this in other books before. You can just take one street down and then, you hit Fierce Street. I think you can just go south from North Hills towards Division Street and then just go along Division Street until you hit Fierce Street and then just, there you are, you're on Fierce Street. It's, not rocket science. You've read, 30 of these books. You never have to go to Shadyside in real life. You already know how to get there.
But they're struggling. And the sisters are bickering in the car over whose fault it is that they're lost. See, Andrea wanted to stop at 7-Eleven for Cokes, so they actually lost the moving van, which was going ahead of them.
And then Maggie was trying to navigate after they lost the moving van, and she told them to go straight on Canyon Road instead of turning right, as Andrea had suggested, and now they don't know where they are, and it's I don't know what's going on.
Mrs. Travers is driving, and she just is tired of hearing these girls arguing, and she just begs Maggie to just relent. And that seems to always be the case with these arguments. Maggie needs to take it easy on Andrea because Andrea has such a hard life. Things don't come easily for her, and she's just not as good at anything as Maggie. So just let Andrea win these arguments.
I'm not going to backseat parents, but this doesn't seem like the best strategy because it doesn't actually lead to behavioral improvement from either of the kids.
Andrea could have a tantrum, scream, cry, break plates, whatever. Everyone was used to her fits. But let Maggie lose it one little bit, and her parents acted as if the whole house had blown up.
Maggie shouldn't be having fits either, so yes. It's unfair that the reaction is disproportionate, but, she does need to be the older sister.
I mean, yes, having fits is bad, but you have one child that is
perpetually allowed to do whatever.
And that's awful. They're only a year apart, so that's what makes it worse.
Yeah, it's really unfair to Maggie. Also, Andrea comes off as being really spoiled. In fact, their father happened to die the same day they had this blowout argument in the morning. Andrea accused Maggie of finishing the milk the night before, even though I guess she didn't do it. And it devolves into Maggie yelling at Andrea for setting fire to her Barbie doll years and years ago. And then Andrea yells that Maggie has ruined her life by stealing everything that she was actually entitled to. And Mr. Travers yells at Maggie to stop picking on her sister. And Maggie's so angry that she dumps her cereal on the floor. At which point, Mr. Travers is enraged that Maggie just won't act her age. And he storms off to work. And later that day, he has a stroke and he dies. And, the two daughters never see him again after that. That was their last interaction with him. And Maggie actually really regrets that she was never able to apologize to her dad for the fight and the way that she behaved. And so that's one of the things that's kind of bothering her a little bit.
That's really tragic.
If you want to play that child psychologist role, we were doing that last episode with, the divorce maybe caused Joanna to get really stressed out and that's what was causing her episodes. Well, same way one could imagine, you hear this story and go okay, Maggie might have some residual PTSD kind of thing. Maybe she's going to go through, trigger some kind of episode. That's kind of what we're expecting coming into this book now.
PTSD?
Whatever. Trauma. Post-trauma.
Well, back in the car, Andrea is still sniping at Maggie for them being lost and her mom for listening to Maggie's directions because Maggie's the one that had to relent, not Andrea.
Anyway, it works out. They finally see the moving van. They probably were going the right way the whole time. They were just doubting themselves and freaking out for no reason.
They had to keep making random turns.
Well, they found it, and they finally get there. The house looks pretty dilapidated. Now, they did visit it once before, but it was raining. So they figured, it looks scary and dilapidated because it was raining. But here they are, and the bright sunshine has not done it any favors. And, this is the reality. They are moving from a house that they can no longer afford to a house that they now can afford. It's not going to look as nice. That's the reality of the situation.
Paint is peeling off on the siding. The shutters are hanging by rusty hinges. Inside, the wallpaper is yellowing and peeling.
So the movers are already, moving the furniture in. So while Maggie and her mother are unloading the car to get their stuff, the personal belongings that they didn't entrust to the movers, Andrea is being a total brat, and she lets Gus just out of the car. And of course, being a dog, he starts running around. The mom tells Andrea, okay, you gotta go get Gus now. And Andrea snottily says, well, Gus is Maggie's dog, so it's not my problem. And he almost gets hit by a car, but finally Maggie manages to kind of get him home without any harm done. This was one of the scariest scenes in the book. I was like, oh no, is he going to kill the dog right off the bat?
Right?
Poor Gus. But no, Gus is fine.
And it's kind of weird because, you always talk about as a reader, you need to have an emotional connection with a character to care if they die or not. But you don't feel the same way about dogs. Like, killing a dog, you just be like heartbroken right away. It's kind of weird. But after Gus is returned home, Andrea and Maggie go upstairs to settle into their bedrooms. And then Maggie discovers that there's this beautiful, old-fashioned canopy bed in her room that the previous owners left behind.
Yeah, surprise, Andrea really wants it desperately. She gets all, like, passive-aggressive about it, like...
You didn't really want a bed like this. You know, it's always been my dream to have a bed like this. I've always wanted it. You know that I love old-fashioned beds, right? And it's a canopy bed. I love canopy beds. But, I mean... You don't like it, do you? It's my dream, not yours.
Right, so then Maggie's like, sees what she's doing, but she just goes like, well, actually, I claimed this room because you wanted the big room with the window, and I got this room because, we wanted to give you what you wanted, so actually finders keepers. And, of course, Andrea just, like, flips a giant tantrum.
Well, for once, Mrs. Travers does not side with Andrea, and Andrea just goes off sulking.
As it should be.
And then Maggie just goes off and gets phone calls from her boyfriend Justin and her friend Dawn.
I like Dawn here because she has like a pretty good friendship with Dawn. At no point is it like that weird relationship that we had in the previous book. There's like no Marb factor here. They have a much healthier friendship, I feel.
I don't know. Their friendship kind of reminded me of... Do you remember the Prom Queen book where they're supposed to be friends, but they all kind of hate each other and competitive against each other, and they're like, I'm going to be the prom queen. I kind of felt that with these girls.
Yeah, it's got a similar vibe, yeah.
First night in the new house, and Maggie has her first bad dream.
Yeah, she imagines herself being in a pink, misty place. Somehow, like through the fog, she makes out a girl with long, ash blonde hair, and the girl's in trouble. Maggie screams herself awake and wakes up the rest of the family, and they rush in there to see if she's okay, and they all kind of like, the three of them talk about her dream and kind of eventually go back to sleep.
Because of all this that happens that night, Maggie actually wakes up late the next day and misses swim practice. So she just goes and tries to make the most of her day by trying to set up her room. And it's kind of depressing because the room is dilapidated. It needs a new coat of paint that no amount of posters or pictures is going to fix. And as she's trying to set up her room, she finds this like dead plant that the previous owners left behind. And that just adds to the whole depressingness of
Was it like, it was like in the window, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens, right? You like have a plant in the window, and like the entire reason it's dead to begin with is that it's like behind the curtain maybe, and like you forgot you had it there, and then you move away, and yeah, you still don't remember that it's there. I think I've moved into apartments before where it's like there's like that dead plant there that is in like some nook, and clearly somebody thought it was a good idea to put a plant there, and then they just forgot that it was there, never watered it, and then it died, and they like moved away and still don't remember it.
Well, you moved into that one apartment with that alarm clock that was left behind, and it only went off like 2 times, just out of nowhere, it just went off.
Well, it was dead. The whole thing was dead. Like, you couldn't turn it on. It was like an alarm clock radio, and you couldn't listen to the radio. The clock didn't work. Nothing worked. But I was like, well, it comes with the apartment, I guess, so I can't throw it out. And then one time, in the morning, it just turns on and starts blasting music. I was like, what the heck is going on? It was like so weird and like staticky and kind of creepy. It was scary. I was like, what the heck?
Oh, Fear Street clock radio.
Yeah, I was like, where's that sound coming from? Because I had it in the living room. I don't know why I had a broken clock radio in the living room. I just did. Whatever.
Anyways, Justin drops by to see the new house and to hang out with his girlfriend.
He's being completely charming, and he's really talking up the house. He even brings by like a bag of sponges to help Mrs. Travers clean up.
What a good boyfriend.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty nice guy. They go to Maggie's room, they make out for a while. But then Andrea kind of does that thing that our dog Hammond likes to do, where she just like walks by pretending like to be doing something else, but really she's just spying on them.
And then she sort of just lings in the door and starts asking random questions and then tries to hit on Justin. And you want to feel bad for her because it is failing so spectacularly. He is just like, what are you doing here? Who are you? What is this?
Yeah.
And she's just getting crushed. But she's hitting on her sister's boyfriend. There's no sympathy here. And then, of course, the first bus.
Right. There's this weird scene where there's a fake out of Justin dying, and it's just one of those chapter ending things, and obviously nothing comes out of it.
It just comes out of nowhere. It makes no sense, and you're just reading it like, what? Like, why is this happening?
Next day is swim practice, and Andrea accuses Maggie of stealing her swim cap.
And then
They get in this big argument about it.
Yep.
Maggie keeps her cool, but Andrea's like having like an epic meltdown.
And then the other girls are like, just go through your swim bag. And she's like, no, she definitely stole it. I don't need to go through my swim bag. And then one of the girls just reaches in and pulls out her swimming cap. And she's just like, oh. And all the girls just start laughing at her.
It's like, wait, what's that right there? In the corner.
The thing about Maggie is she's, because you get her inner thoughts. And she's just like, oh, I feel really bad. Even though she was accusing me, I just feel bad that everyone's laughing at her.
Yeah, Maggie's not, a bad sister or anything like that. Andrea just has problems. So anyway, the girls are all competing to see who's going to go to All-State for the 200 IM. And it's the first of 4 races that they're going to do to, I guess, qualify for this thing. And there are 4 girls competing to do this. It's the characters we already described. Maggie finishes first. At very close second is Dawn, who was like actually kind of ahead of her for a little bit there, because Maggie's like really struggling because she's been missing practice and missing sleep. Third place we got Tiffany, and Andrea was like way back and forth and is unhappy about it. Go figure.
How surprising. And then they have an actual swim practice with the rest of the team afterwards, because there are other members of the swim team who aren't doing the 200 IM.
Right, and they're therefore somehow like inferior and like subpar. Somehow Arl Stein thinks the 200 IM is like the end-all be-all.
What about the 400 IM? Or the 800 IM? I don't know. I've watched the Olympics. I know there are other IMs.
Yeah, listeners, if you did swimming in high school, let us know if this is a thing. Like, maybe this is the most prestigious event. I don't know. I didn't hang out with the swim crowd, so I'm not sure.
Was weird as I did.
Did they talk about the 200 IM?
No.
Was it like all they talked about all year long?
No. They love talking about their shaving parties. Because they would have the pasta and breadsticks the night before, and then during those parties, they would have the shaving parties. Because, to be hairless is to be faster or something like that.
Right.
But don't people just wear those, like, bodysuits now?
Those are expensive, yeah. If you're in high school, you're not going to be able to afford that.
Right. Yeah, so they would shave each other.
Yeah.
Or themselves. I'm not entirely sure.
All right, so cue end of chapter bus.
Yeah, so practice is done. Maggie is finished showering, and she's the last one out. She goes through the pool area to exit, and she sees Dawn floating in the pool. Blah, 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 blah.
Like face down, like, oh my gosh.
She's like, oh my gosh, she's dead, and she rushes in, and
she jumps in with all the clothing on.
Dawn's just like, I was practicing my breathing. It doesn't make sense.
Maybe it just goes to show that she's not an evil person, that she, like, jumps in to save someone if she thinks they're in trouble. That night, Maggie goes home, and she has another bad dream.
It's still pink and hazy, and it still involves that girl with ash blonde hair, but this time she's sleeping in a canopy bed.
And suddenly a blade comes out of nowhere and stabs the sleeping girl while slamming her head against the headboard. Maggie wakes up and realizes her bed is the same as the bed in the dream. Oh my god, she's sleeping in like the dead girl's stabby stab bed, and while she's thrashing around the bed, Andrea comes to help Maggie calm down.
Well, first it's like this nice sisterly thing,
right?
Because they're talking about the dream, but because it's Andrea and Maggie, it just devolves. So Andrea insinuates that Maggie's dream has to do with the fact that Maggie beat everyone in today's swim practice. And then Maggie brushes it off and makes a joke that Andrea's just saying that because Andrea wants to swim the 200 IM and she lost. Andrea loses her shit completely. She accuses Maggie of just insulting her, but then pretending to be innocent, and that, she's just trying to be a good sister, and what's wrong with her?
I can kind of see it from Andrea's point of view, because if you're constantly low-key dropping little, like, backhanded compliments into your daily speech with your sister, it could start to grate after a while, especially if your older sister's always better than you at everything. You might even start to see little slights where none were meant or none exist, so I can kind of see where Andrea's coming from here. It's not the most biggest blowout argument I ever saw. It's okay. The argument devolves into Maggie accusing Andrea of making like a big deal out of nothing. I'm not actually like trying to insult you every other word. And then Andrea accuses Maggie of dreaming up a girl being stabbed because Maggie must actually want to stab people. And it's something she learned in psych class. So I guess she's learning about like dream analysis in psych class, and she's trying to apply it over here. She's got like that amateur psychologist thing going on, which we all love to do. I mean, I think we've all sat back on that metaphorical couch and fiddled with our metaphorical pipe, did our best Freud impression, tried to analyze somebody's dream.
Well, Freud is a hack, but there is a term for that, and it's called a psychopath.
Ah.
That's someone who just babbles psychology nonsense at people because they've taken like one psych class.
Well, what's the term for one that takes 0 psych classes and still attempts to babble psychology nonsense?
A physicist.
Oh, snap!
Back to the book.
So now we get to the first real life accident, right?
It's not a bus, guys. It's not a bus.
Yeah, somebody actually gets hurt here. It happens in the hallway between classes. Maggie just left her class and she sees Andrea up ahead in the hallway and she wants to chat, so she's trying to catch up to her. She's like trying to like shove through the crowd. She kind of goes into the stairwell. They're all heading down the stairwell and there's a big crowd, right? And so she's trying to like wheedle her way down the stairs faster than the other people so she can catch up to Andrea. But we all know that's never going to happen. We've all been through stairwells. That's not like even a smart thing to do. Anyway, Dawn is in the stairwell too and she sees Dawn up ahead and suddenly there's a surge of people and Dawn is shoved down the stairs and she ends up with breaking her arm.
She ends up with breaking her arm?
Yep.
She ends up with a broken arm?
Well,
or she ends up breaking her arm?
Well, there's a little mini buzz here because at first she's like unconscious and we've seen people like die falling down stairs in all kinds of Fear Street books. It turns out she had a concussion and a broken arm. And as she wakes up dazed and confused and she sees like Maggie's concerned face right in front of her as like the first person she sees, she accuses Maggie of pushing her down the stairs. Maggie's like, no, I didn't do that. Dawn's like, well, somebody pushed me. I swear I felt someone push me. Which, you know, yeah, probably somebody did push her because, you know, there's like a whole bunch of people there all pushing each other to get down the stairs.
Well, after being accused, Maggie is shook and she skips swim practice and she goes home and she ends up falling asleep in her backyard.
And so as she's sleeping on the ground, there's another bus scene where she finally meets her neighbors. She meets Mr. Avery, who, like, saw her and was, like, concerned, I guess. And he invites her to come over to his house. The Averys are just this really adorable old couple, you know, just the stereotypical family portraits everywhere and fresh-baked cookies and hospitality and just, like, have all the neighborhood gossip. Which is how she finds out that there's actually kind of like a dark past to the house that she's living in now. There used to be a family there that lived a while back, and their daughter was murdered. And that's when they moved out, and then the house was on the market for a long time after that because, you know, people don't generally want to buy a house where a murder occurred.
So the Helfers were the previous owners that Serge was talking about, and they actually weren't there for very long. Their daughter, Miranda, who, you know, was a very pretty girl with ash blonde hair, about Maggie's age, she was stabbed in her own bed. And yeah, the house was on the market for months, but just because there was a murder there doesn't mean people know there's a murder there. Bob Jameson was the real estate guy, and the Averys reckoned that he was getting a bit desperate and just wasn't telling anyone about the murder.
Yeah.
But you figure the Travers were probably desperate for a new house to get into, so
Sure.
Would that have deterred Mrs. Travers?
I mean, like, she might have gotten, like, a better price out of it, right?
Probably.
Maybe that's how they got into it. Maybe they got into the house because they were able to talk the price way down. You know, it's been on the market for a long time. The real estate guy's desperate. Throw in a couple $1,000 discount for, like, the murder bed, and there you go. It's like normally, if you get a little bit of, like, antique furniture with the house, you pay extra. It's, like, the opposite of that, right? Like, we'll take the bed for $5,000 less on the house.
So Justin and Maggie talk about what she learned about from the Averys about Miranda. Maggie thinks that maybe the bed has memory and it remembers the murder and it's like trying to warn her about something.
Right, and Justin thinks that Maggie is overthinking things and beds don't have memories. So get real. Yeah, he's kind of just ignores that whole line of thought. He doesn't want to contemplate it.
He also starts ignoring Maggie after that. In general, just doesn't want to talk to her.
Well, right, so he doesn't want to hear it. If she would talk about other things, I'm sure they'd be fine.
That's all she wants to talk about because she's
doesn't
getting
wanna-
these dreams.
Exactly. At swim practice, Maggie wins once again. This is now the second race. And with her rival Dawn out of the way, it's much easier. Tiffany is way off in second, and Andrea is still third. Tiffany and Maggie are now the shady side representatives at Allstate, and Andrea doesn't really take well to being the alternate.
Well, too bad. Maggie has another nightmare. This time when she wakes up, she's kind of upset, not about the dream, but upset the fact that she wants to see more.
Right, she wants to see, like, how it ends, and...
She wants to see the girl's face.
Exactly. But when she wakes up, she actually finds Andrea in her room with something silver and glinting.
It's a knife!
Yeah.
No,
No, it's a
not.
bus.
It's a bus. It's actually a curling iron.
Yeah, and Maggie can't fall back asleep, so she tries out her dad's trick of reading a boring book, which... and drinking hot chocolate in the kitchen.
And this is Maggie's most relatable moment for me, because Maggie chooses to read Moby Dick by Herman Melville.
Which is not a boring book, in my opinion, but whatever.
I disagree. The Wishbone version of it is great, though.
So I judge all books based in relation to Moby Dick because I think it's the perfect 4-star book on the Goodreads rating system. It definitely has certain flaws. It's not a 5-star book, but at the same time, it's like an all-time classic, and so it deserves that 4 stars. The way I judge every book is it as good as Moby Dick? And if it's not, then it gets 4 or less. And if it's better than Moby Dick, then it gets 5 stars. Few books deserve that high honor of being better than Moby Dick.
Moby Dick gets the special honor of being so boring that Maggie can't even bear to sit with it for very long, and she just puts it away and goes back to her room.
She was so gripped by this thrilling story of
the
Captain
Town Ho,
Ahab and the Pequod.
the Lakemen,
And the Canalers.
and the Canalers.
Mm-hmm.
Was she reading a thing about whales and how they're not mammals, they're actually fishes? Because that was a thrilling, 500 pages of my life.
I'm no
she goes back to her
cetologist, but
bed.
if Herman Melville thinks they're a fish, they might be a fish. I don't know.
I do not want this to devolve into Moby Dick, because that hours of my life I can't have back. So she goes back to her room and she looks at her bed and she finds a knife in her pillow.
And this is not a bust. There's actually a knife in her pillow.
Or is there?
Right, because when she grabs her mom to show her the knife stuck in her pillow, the knife's not there anymore.
And the pillow's fine.
Yep, there's no stabby stab wound in the pillow or anything like that.
Maggie is sure it's Andrea, and she just storms over to her room, wakes her up, drags her out, and her mom and Andrea are both looking at her like, what is going on with Maggie?
See it from Maggie's point of view. There's 3 people in the house and a dog. The dog didn't do it. Her mom certainly didn't do it, so it's gotta be Andrea.
Because Andrea was awake recently.
She just saw the light on under her door when she went downstairs to go read Moby Dick. So, logically speaking, it was either a ghost or it was Andrea. And Andrea's been acting real weird lately, so who knows?
Why didn't she just scream? If she screams, everyone comes running. She can just look at the knife.
Oh, keep the eye in constant... yeah, but she doesn't think the knife's gonna, go out of the pillow. Right? And at this point, as the reader, we don't even know. Okay, it turns out later on, spoiler alert, the knife really did go in the pillow.
But isn't your normal reaction when you see a knife in your pillow to scream? That would be my reaction. I mean, my reaction to anything is screaming, so I guess that's just me.
I mean, it's a fight or flight response. Maybe you want to just run away.
So in the following week of swim practice, what's happening is that Tiffany has actually beaten Maggie.
Yeah, every time. And Coach Randall pulls Maggie aside after practice to, chat about life and swimming and whatever. Because obviously she's not holding together too good with not getting any sleep. And after their talk, Maggie notices the door to the pool is still open. And as she's leaving the coach's office, she goes in there and Tiffany is lying on the ground with a freaking knife sticking out her side.
She starts screaming, and then she walks over to Tiffany, picks up the knife, and is holding it and staring at it as people run in. You've summoned people. Don't touch anything.
That's true.
It's a bloody tableau just as the coach and other teachers run in and see Maggie standing over Tiffany with a bloody knife with blood everywhere.
Yep. Well, the police questioned Maggie for a while, but no one actually thinks she did it, which makes sense because she was just talking to the coach moments before, and the coach knows she wasn't fiddling with a big old knife while they were talking, and there was no time for the stabbing to occur and all that blood loss. And I'm sure it's fine, but also Tiffany didn't see what happened. She was kind of grabbed from behind. The end result is Andrea is moved up from being the alternate to one of the 2 swimmers at Allstate.
And she can't stop boasting about it.
Yeah, because, it was all based on her accomplishment due to, only 4 girls signing up for this.
And 2 of them getting injured. And Maggie's like, Andrea, stop gloating. These people got injured. And Andrea's response is, don't take away my happiness and my success. I'm allowed to be happy.
Happy on the backs of people getting stabbed and broke-armed. At this point, I'm starting to suspect that maybe Andrea is the one that's the crazy one, right?
No, she's the red herring. She's the R.L. Stein obvious red herring.
I was falling for it. There's nobody else in the house when that knife thing happened, and now all of a sudden, this girl's getting stabbed with a knife.
Maggie has her dream again that night, but this time, Miranda isn't in bed. She's actually running through a tunnel. Maggie's trying to run with Miranda in this dream. And Maggie realizes that there's someone chasing Miranda. And then, you know how dreams sort of morph, and then suddenly they are running into a pink haze and the canopy bed. And then Maggie realizes that she usually starts at the end of the dream and not the beginning. So she finally saw the beginning part of the events. And then she finally gets to see Miranda's horrified face. And then she wakes up and she sees Miranda standing at the side of her bed with a knife.
Maggie starts screaming.
As she should.
Right, and Mrs. Travers runs in as the girl jumps out of the window. Mrs. Travers thinks that Maggie has lost her mind and is going to send Maggie to therapy. But now you're starting to see that, like, okay, maybe there actually is another presence in the house.
Okay, so the next chapter is like, there's ridiculous plot that Maggie's geology class is going to some caverns and they're studying stalagmites and stalactites, and it's honestly just a waste of a chapter. And like, there were pages before that also talked about this stupid trip. It has nothing to the book, and I'm not even gonna bother with it.
Seems like an excuse for Maggie to run around scared in a series of tunnels, which I guess maybe mirrors the dream she just had.
No, it's actually a complete waste of time, and R.L. Stine wanted to fill up 10 pages. Good job. Next up, there's a scene with Justin walking with Maggie. Their conversation is just awkward and stilted.
Yeah, because he still doesn't want to, like, listen to her talk about her bad dreams. He's just not really being supportive of her in that regard. You know, that's not something he's interested in at all.
She's seeing the psychiatrist her mom saw after her dad died, and Justin doesn't want to talk about that either. This is when you go into bad boyfriend territory, I think.
Well, this is also like the stereotype of anyone that has some kind of like mental issue. People don't want to talk about that stuff, so like you see that with PTSD a lot. You know, nobody wants to, or like there's that stereotype that nobody wants to deal with it, or, you know, it's somehow looked down upon, which then feeds back into people not wanting to get help for their PTSD due to the stigma. Justin's kind of falling into that category of people who either look down on or don't want to hear about people that have some kind of an emotional or mental problem, would rather talk about something else and doesn't want to acknowledge it as like a legitimate concern. So yes, bad boyfriend territory, like Anna said. As they're walking down the street on their way home from school, talking and Justin being all dismissive, Maggie actually freaking sees Miranda by the hedges. And she goes like, oh my god, Justin, look. She tells Justin to look, and Miranda's gone. Oh my god, it's like the same way that the knife disappeared from her pillow and Miranda jumped out the window before her mom could come in the room. Is Maggie going crazy? I don't know. When Maggie gets home, her family and the Averys are having a nice cookout. Kind of like get to know the neighbors, like let's make a bunch of burgers. That's really nice.
Andrea is in a particularly good mood.
Yeah, I wonder why.
But Mrs. Travers is, you know, talking Maggie up like, oh, only you would be able to get to know our neighbors so well that we have this lovely cookout. And, you know, I'm too introverted, but she doesn't take after me. She takes after, and she doesn't want to talk about Mr. Travers at all. But she's like really proud of Maggie for introducing the families, and they're really enjoying themselves.
Yeah, it's a fun little cookout they have. Maggie goes back up to her room. She makes an excuse to go inside the house because she's probably just really tired. So she's like, I'm going to go get some ginger ale or something she was going to get. But she just wants to actually sneak away and go to sleep. So she makes that excuse, goes back to the house, and goes to her room, and her bed is gone.
What?
Yeah, the bed's not there anymore. Like, all of a sudden, poof.
Well, it turns out that Mrs. Travers realized that maybe the bed was just bad mojo.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had Mr. Avery and one of the movers who helped them move into the house move the bed into the attic somehow. We'll get into that.
Yeah, Maggie's upset because she wants to sleep in the bed to see the whole dream through to the end.
That night, after everyone's gone to bed, she creeps up into the attic to sleep in that bed. But what's there?
Miranda is literally sleeping in the bed in the attic.
Maggie wakes Miranda up, and Miranda just groggily looks around and goes, what's going on? And then she sees Maggie, and then she grabs for a knife, and she tries to stab Maggie.
This is when the real story comes out. Is there like another person in the house? Is it a ghost? Well, it turns out it's not a ghost. It's actually Miranda's sister Gina, who killed Miranda because Miranda was being so mean. Miranda always said she had powers, so this probably explains why Maggie was having all those bad dreams. she must have used those powers to come back from the afterlife and have a connection with the bed and used it to warn Maggie about Gina. Gina's actually locked up in a psych ward where she actually belongs, but escaped right before the Travers moved in, and she's been sort of pilfering food from the fridge this whole time and like living on scraps and hiding in the attic. Even managed to make a copy of their keys, so now she can just come and go as she pleases.
Gina manages to overpower Maggie, and right as she's about to stab her, Andrea sort of pops into the attic. And Gina just says, Andrea, I'm gonna kill your sister for you. We're gonna get it done tonight.
Yeah, so Maggie is really horrified that her sister would be in on this whole, like, operation to kill her, but it's another bus.
Andrea has no clue what the hell's going on. She's like, who's that? What's going on? Why is there a knife? Oh my god.
Yeah, it turns out Gina has decided to sort of unilaterally play fairy godmother to Andrea, and she basically wants to get rid of Maggie because she's just so mean to Andrea.
Just like her sister was to her.
And she heard Dawn and Tiffany so Andrea could make Allstate. She's been trying to help her this whole time.
Just as Gina is about to kill Maggie, Andrea drags the canopy down onto the two girls on the bed and helps Maggie crawl out of the bed. And then both girls sort of jump onto the bed on top of the canopy to hold it down over Gina, keeping her wrapped up in it.
At this point, Mrs. Travers comes into the attic because of the ruckus and immediately goes to call 911. The police come and the three Travers women talk about what's happened. They agree that Gus was totally useless as a guard dog.
And then they realize there's only a few more hours until Allstate. OMG.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Bad hip? Bad back? Bad neck? Bad dreams? Our newest mattress features new ortho-contouring technology developed by an actual quantum physicist. It relieves pressure on all the right parts, from your body to your mind. An extra layer of memory foam absorbs any distressing thoughts for a peaceful night's sojourn into dreamland. Using our proprietary blend of mineral-based fibers, there's no fear of mites, bacteria, and other undesirable organisms in your bed. The last mattress you'll ever buy. The Dreamland Ortho Contouring Memory Bed is available only if you call 740-229-9618. First 94 callers get free shipping anywhere in the Tri-Shadyside area.
Fear Street Mythos. Right at the beginning of this book, this is getting back into where's Shadyside, right? As they're driving from North Hills to the Fear Street neighborhood, they end up taking Canyon Road, and that's obviously a big hint. You can actually search Google Maps or what have you and see, okay, what kind of street names do we have in different states? It turns out there are no streets named Canyon Road or Canyon anything in Massachusetts, as far as I can tell. But there's actually there's a good handful of them in Ohio. There's also a smattering in Pennsylvania and New York as well. Obviously, as you go out west, every town has a canyon road pretty much. But at first I was worried. I was going into this, does Ohio even have any canyon roads? Not sure. I was a little bit worried, but there's actually like a whole bunch up around Cleveland, and there's a smattering around the rest of the state as well. We also learned that Fear Street has one of the highest crime rates in the country. It was actually stated in the book.
It might have been a joke, I'm not sure, but I would take it as canon.
Well, I mean, coming from a neighborhood like North Hills, basically the way it came up is North Hills is really safe. And by comparison to North Hills, I guess Fear Street must seem like some kind of crime-ridden whatever.
But how many of the Fear Street books are North Hills kids actually ending up causing the trouble on Fear Street?
In previous books, it was always the old town that had the
high crime rates.
The high crime rates and the miscreants. So maybe this is kind of a joke.
Right, because we find out about the old town being the hellhole of Shadyside because the rich person on Fear Street had to go there. So I guess Fear Street couldn't be the crime-ridden hellhole because the rich girl was there.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess
there was a couple other books where it was mentioned, right? That the old town was not the most savory part of town.
They always mention it, but I just think it's funny that for here we have the North Hills going to Fear Street, and Fear Street's just hellhole. But one of the richest girls in school lives in Fear Street, so that it can't be the hellhole in that book. It has to be the old town.
Yeah.
They actually move into 23 Fear Street.
Echoing our very first episode, The New Girl, where we had some, we thought, significant house numbers, like 44, or was it 444? I forget. Anyway, we're going to take a look at the number 23 and see what kind of significance we can find there.
Most basic thing is obviously you think this story starts with a tale about 2 sisters, but it's actually a tale about 3 different sisters.
Yes. Also, there's the 23 Enigma, which is kind of a theory that has like a few adherents or followers about the number 23 being an unlucky number.
It was started by William S. Burroughs, I think, right?
Correct, yes. It grew to prominence to the point where they even made a movie called The Number 23.
With Jim Carrey.
I didn't see the movie, but according to Wikipedia, it is based on the 23 Enigma theory.
And then you have 23. There's 46 chromosomes, but a parent gives 23. Each parent gives 23, and they only have one parent.
So the other 23 is out of the picture.
Yep.
And so they each share 23 chromosomes from this one parent, I guess. Is that how it works? No, they all get mixed together.
Yes. Each gamete has 23.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, right. Each sex cell has 23 chromosomes. So, okay, going away from biology and genetics towards something completely opposite. Have you ever heard the line, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil"?
It was in Titanic.
Right. It is a very famous line. It is perhaps one of the most often quoted psalms from the Bible, and it is Psalm number 23. So there you go. I think that's an appropriate line for this book as well.
It should have just been Fear Street Psalm 23 then.
Or Fear Street, the shadow of death.
Fear Street, the Enigma.
Fear Street, fear no evil.
See no evil?
You know, these are all, like, good titles that I'm sure if R.L. Stein is listening,
oh
feel
my god,
free.
He should do a trilogy of Fear Street, See No Evil, Fear Street, Hear No Evil, Fear Street, Do No Evil.
Ooh.
Copyright, Rent Read Podcast.
The Evil Saga.
Yes. The last thing that I have in Fear Street Mythos is their geology field trip takes them to Glen Rock Mountain, which is 45 minutes outside of Shadyside and has caverns, and it's a popular tourist destination. I actually did some research in Ohio. There is a very well-known cavern. I think it's called just Ohio Cavern. It's right outside of Columbus, where R.L. Stein grew up, and there are stalactites and stalagmites.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's the one he's talking about.
Yes, there's also a canyon road just east of Columbus, like out in the burbs. So, I don't know, I'm just saying.
I think he actually pulled a lot from his childhood in this book.
If you want to get a little bit more into the mythos, I mean, we do have a little bit of the supernatural here because there's no good explanation for the dreams. Gina doesn't take credit for them. It's not like...
Well, no, she tells her that her sister has always had a connection with spiritualness or whatever.
But there could have been an explanation, right? She could have been like, well, I've been spiking your drinks with hallucinogens or something. But, like, that's not what happened. She, like, fully acknowledges that there must be, like, a supernatural thing going on here.
Do you think it was a supernatural thing that was just because of the bed? Or it was in the room? She fell asleep downstairs a few times on the couch and outside, and she was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So do you think it was the connection to the bed that she needed?
Yeah, I mean, it was either that or Gina was actually, like, putting something in the bed. But, you know, she is crazy. She was in a psych ward for a reason. So maybe she didn't, like, fully, like...
Can we not insinuate that, like, psych wards are just filled with people who are crazy? It's not necessarily...
Well, she needed help anyway.
Yes.
And maybe she was not fully aware of all of her actions. And so maybe she was doing something. Like, for all you know, maybe she found a really deep vein of the blue clay mineral that was just running down to the core of the mother lode, and it was like the pure stuff. Who knows? Maybe she was like digging it up out of the ground, like right in the backyard, and just like putting it in the bed. We are told that Gina's family only lived in the house for a short time, so they too moved from elsewhere. And this could be going back towards the theory we had in the previous book, which is that people that live on Fear Street are already like kind of more adopted to the higher levels of the mineral that are just present in their environment. And it comes as a shock to the system when you are moving from a less saturated area.
Well, I think it's Shadyside in general because I feel like Maggie and Andrea were pretty okay.
Yeah.
Because they had the doses that the school had given them.
Correct.
And plus they are on the swim team, so they're constantly in the water anyways.
That's true, but I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is like maybe Maggie somehow gets an extra dose because she's clearly starting to see stuff in that bed. But on the other hand, the two previous sisters, they kind of, you know, it's possible they moved from out of town. Maybe they were completely exposed to this for the first time in their lives and like it drove them nuts. right?
Well, I think one is more susceptible than the other. Didn't we say, like, if you're weaker in constitution or whatever, then it affects you more so?
Well, for one of the sisters, it developed, like, her kind of psychic powers and allowed her to transcend this lifetime and, like, pass on parts of herself into the world after death.
I think if R.L. Stine if he were, like, a braver writer, and he wasn't just trying to write these books, I feel like that story would have been more interesting. The story about those sisters, about her, like, realizing, whoa, I've got these cool powers, and that's really interesting, and it's, like, growing, whereas Gina is getting more and more paranoid and aggressive.
Yes.
And then ending with Gina killing her sister.
Right.
I think that would have been a really interesting Fear Street book.
Maybe, like, just as Miranda was onto something, maybe she was gonna get to, like, some kind of really big breakthrough with her powers, and that's when she gets killed.
We are ignoring the fact that it's a canopy bed. There's 2 levels to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Miranda was able to, like, transcend one plane into the other. Like, maybe she exists not on the plane of the bed, but, like, in the plane of the canopy, so to speak.
There's, like, the temporal, where you lay your body down, and there's the incorporeal, which is represented by the floating curtains. You know, the curtain also is common, like, shorthand for a ghost.
Or the other side. Remember in Order of the Phoenix, it's just the curtains separating one world from another.
Yeah.
If you remember the scene in the Ministry.
So a canopy bed is almost like a place where the 2 worlds meet. It's kind of symbolic of that, almost. Which makes sense. As you go to sleep, your mind is free to wander into all realms and all dimensions. And that is how most people experience anything that's kind of out of the natural order of things. Mostly, we do that in our dreams. That's the only experience most people have with anything that's out of the ordinary, is in your dreams, anything can happen. Sometimes creepy, bad, nightmarish things happen. And sometimes it's good things that are out of the ordinary. But that's an interesting analysis of the canopy bed. I think if we were students in Andrea's psychoanalysis class, we'd get, like, a pretty good A-grade paper out of that one.
I don't think you need to be in the psychoanalysis class. I think this is any basic English class, dude. Do you think Gina's beef with Maggie and choosing Andrea was because she had seen or heard the interactions of the sisters? Or do you think it was just because Maggie was sleeping in the canopy bed and was in that room and therefore represented Miranda? Like, if Maggie had given the bed to Andrea, would she have tried to kill Andrea?
That's interesting. Gina wasn't necessarily trying to kill Maggie right off the bat. She slowly grew to take Andrea's side on things, but initially there wasn't that animosity. It was only towards the later part of the book where you started to see physical threats like the knife in the pillow. But even then, I think she was just kind of messing with Maggie more than anything else. Why don't we move on to Callbacks?
Dina Martinson and Jade Smith. Again, they were her partners in that cavern.
But wait a second, what about Dawn Rogers? I'm pretty sure she was in another book. Like, wasn't she the prom queen?
Well, we had just mentioned the prom queen earlier, and yes, she was one of the prom queen candidates. She was a senior back in book 15, and we're at book 22, so she's also stuck in the loop, interestingly enough.
Wait a second, aren't they juniors now?
She's senior in the prom queen. She's one of the prom queen candidates. She was actually the best friend of the main character of the prom queen, Lizzie something or another, and she's just as competitive there, and she steals one of the other prom queen's boyfriends. Remember Simone, the baddie in the prom queen? Her boyfriend was Justin, and Dawn goes on a date with Justin, and guess what? Justin is Dawn's ex-boyfriend in this book.
Oh my god. Justin is like the freaking Suki Thomas of the men. Except for there's that other guy.
Corey's friend.
Oh my god.
Dawn in the prom queen, so she gets Simone's boyfriend to go out with her, which is awful. She's really competitive. She's a super bitch. She tells everyone they look ugly in the dresses, and so she can buy the dresses that they wanted. And she's like super confident that she will be the prom queen.
But she's also, like, kind of cool.
She actually gets knocked out in the bathroom of the movie theater in the prom queen, and then she gets stabbed in the chest, but manages to live. So I honestly don't know how timeline works for these kids, because getting stabbed in the chest makes it very difficult to be a star swimmer the same season.
Well, also, like, isn't her arm broken?
Yes.
Still? Okay, if she's in Shadyside, she was already senior year, and her arm was already broken, and she was stabbed in the chest, and she's still swimming? How does that...
Her arm was broken in this book.
Yeah.
And she was no longer swimming in this book after her arm got broken.
Right.
But in the Prom Queen, they also don't talk about her being a swimmer. They talk about her just being, like, athletic in general. And I think she plays tennis in the Prom Queen.
So maybe she's, like, a junior? Maybe this is, like, a prequel book. Maybe... Or the time loop is like...
No, because Justin is her ex-boyfriend in Bad Dreams, but she has just gotten together with him in Prom Queen.
But in Prom Queen, she's a senior. So my mind is like trying to bend towards how this could possibly work. Even with the time loop, this still doesn't work out at all, right? I mean...
Yeah, because in one of the things in the Prom Queen was, but what you seniors don't know is that as a special treat, I've been able to rent the newly refurbished Housie Manor house.
Right.
So they're seniors.
Well,
it's not junior prom.
Okay, it's senior prom. So if you want to be queen of senior prom, you have to be a senior.
I mean, it could be a school that has a mixed junior and senior prom. I don't think it is. It sounds like it's just their senior prom. So she was a senior in that, but maybe she just, because she was stabbed in the chest, she missed so much school.
She had to repeat.
I guess.
But
it's the only way this makes sense.
What about her boyfriend? And her boyfriend dumped her because she repeated school,
but
I guess?
He should be a senior too. Did they all fail together?
Maybe every single year, everybody fails.
I think this is just...
Are we still on nitpicks? Because this should be a nitpick.
I think this takes us back to Fear Street Mythos, actually.
This is either a giant nitpick or a gigantic Fear Street Mythos thing that...
It goes into our time thing, right? Because if you think about it, maybe what Maggie was seeing wasn't Miranda showing her the past. Maybe she was caught in that time loop.
Maybe it was like a crossover. The two loops like merged together, and the nexus of the merging was Fear Street.
She asked Justin if he had ever heard of the family that had lived there. Like, oh, have you heard of Miranda, whatever her name is? And he was like, I've never heard of her. I've never heard of this murder. That happened in one of the timelines, and then that got wiped out once the reset happened.
Exactly. And what about the Averys?
I mean,
they just kind of got brought over into this timeline as part of like the little intersection of like time and space on Fear Street. Like that's got to be the only explanation, right? They're like the guardians of Fear Street.
The guardians of that particular story.
And we get the dog coming back. You know, anytime you get to see the dog featuring in a Fear Street book, you got to think to yourself, Guardians of Fear Street. And the Averys in this case take that form, human form, take that role as the Guardians of Fear Street in this book. This is actually, like, really interesting. I'm glad we, like, hit upon this after exiting the Fear Street Mythos section, but, like, we can loop back into it.
Just like Fear Street loops.
Yeah, exactly. Our podcast can loop back towards the mythos, even though we're already in callbacks. There's another way that this book mirrors the Prom Queen, I believe. And in that book, we had this, like, deranged, crazy girl living...
Simone.
Right.
Of the Simone and Justin Simone. She was also one of the Prom Queen candidates.
Right. So she faked her own death and then lived in the rafters above the stage. This is kind of like...
I think she lived in a prop room.
Right, but it's like, which was up in the rafters. And it's reminiscent of the way Gina is living up in the attic of this house and causing like havoc and like injuring and stabbing people and breaking people's arms. It's like almost like a mirror of that story.
He just brought characters over into it from one book into the other, hoping that no one would notice. Hey, R.L. Stine, we noticed.
Instead of being candidates for Prom Queen, they're actually like trying out for All-State Swimming 200 IM. There's 4 girls in the running. 2 of them get injured and like get knocked out of the running. And then there's somebody living upstairs in an attic or rafters type area that's causing all the havoc. I mean, like...
And Justin is passing his like STDs from one girl to another.
It's like the same freaking story again. I don't know if he's consciously recycling the plot line or if he's just... It just happened. I don't know. This is one to think about. I am scratching my head right now going like...
I think I know what the answer is. It's not very nice to R.L. Stine, but...
This is about the clay mineral time loop. I mean, come on. What would the vampires say? We got to take a deeper dive into the analysis.
Well,
here.
I love how this really adds so much to our time loop thing.
Honestly, if all of the previous episodes where we talked about the time loop theory, culminating in that big Schwab theory reveal where it finally like all came together, all of that was just grasping at straws compared to this book, which the only way it works, you can get stabbed and like have your arm broken twice in your senior year and still be on the tennis team and like a star swimmer, is if there's a time loop, because nobody heals that quickly.
Wait, what's her second broken arm?
She broke her arm falling down the stairs.
In the Prom Queen?
No, in this book.
You said twice.
Yeah, she broke her arm in the Prom Queen.
No, she didn't.
You said she did.
She got concussed.
Oh.
She got knocked out in the bathroom.
Oh, shoot. But then she got stabbed.
Yes, in the chest. Apparently it went like hilts to the chest.
That was the one with like the really epic fight scene right at the end. Where
With
they're
the
like struggling with the knife and the sandbags and stuff. And she like pulls the knife out and then stumbles over and like pulls the rope and kills the girl.
The girl doesn't die.
Well, whatever. She gets like knocked with... I remember like that was one of the most epic fight scenes ever. Because it's like one of those, you get beaten up, you get injured real bad, but you just keep fighting no matter what. Like you're just fighting for your life. That was actually one of the most compelling like fight scenes he's ever written. But anyway, the only way all of those injuries stack up together into the same senior year while being a star on two different sports teams is if there's a time loop, right? And the fact that none of that gets mentioned, the fact that Justin is like ex-boyfriend of Psycho Killer and is now dating somebody that's being stalked by another Psycho Killer doesn't trigger any memories for him, although maybe that's why he doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know. This is the most time loopish book we've read so far, or at least parallel dimensions.
Well, what's interesting is I didn't tweak to it at first because Suki Thomas's mom was not the real estate agent. But wow, our callbacks and Fear Street mythos sort of became really mixed up.
This is basically like the Schwab theory of Red Read podcast right here. It's the basic uncertainty principle. Do you really know if you're in Fear Street mythos or if you're in callbacks? Who knows? Could be one, could be the other.
Why don't we go to 90s things?
Well, wallpaper.
Yes, I feel like that's a very 90s thing. I think modern design has gone to like painting more.
Right, especially if there's a house that's on the market for a long time. Like the real estate agent will finally break down, strip the wallpaper and get it painted.
Yeah.
Just to get the thing to sell.
When I go on Zillow and I look at houses and I look at the pictures inside and I see wallpaper, I think, oh, that's a house that hasn't been redecorated in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I thought was a nice thing was misreading a map. In the beginning of the book, people just use Google Maps nowadays, and it'll say, "Oh, turn left here, turn right here," and it'll send you like the wrong way on a one-way street, and you scream like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die!"
There's any number of GPS navigating systems that will get you where you need to go without you having to unfurl a paper map and get lost. Nitpicks. So one of the things that I kind of don't get is the way this Allstate thing works. We've got two people slated to go from Shadyside to Allstate no matter what. And it can only be from the 4 people that originally signed up for this event, even though Andrea clearly sucks, and there might be like another girl on the swim team that's better than her at 200 IM, even though she hasn't been practicing for it because maybe she didn't want to enter it because Don Rogers and
Maggie Travers
were in it. But like now with Don Rogers out of the picture, shouldn't there be more girls jumping into this thing?
From my understanding of these sort of things, it's like you basically train for these events, and then it's very hard to like get into it because you're training for other events. So you have like a certain rhythm of how you're turning into each specific stroke, and it has to be timed perfectly. So you aren't training it, then you won't necessarily be good at it. But my issue is when you do things like Allstate for most things from music to sports to, science competitions, you go through local competitions. Like you compete against local schools and then you get enough points based on how your performance was in each of these local competitions. The best from all the local things like your district or your county, that's how they pick who makes Allstate. It's not just each school goes, oh, well, this is who I'm sending to Allstate.
That's true, yeah. So they should be like competing against Waynesboro. There should be like a meet where they compete against Waynesboro for Allstate, and that doesn't happen. Or is it Waynesbridge?
Waynesbridge.
Oh, I'm sorry, I called it Waynesboro, but I meant Waynesbridge.
There's also Central City.
Yeah.
But like the other sports teams obviously compete against other schools. Like swim teams compete with other schools. That's a thing that they do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of weird.
Well, maybe we missed something, and Shadyside is actually in Rhode Island, which, is famously composed of like 3 different towns and is about the size of an iceberg or whatever other small object you can think of.
There's still more than one school because you would be like inter-district competitions.
Right, but if you can fit everybody into one gymnasium, then you can have all states with like just the best students from each school. And when you have the state the size of a small
if
county...
you think about it, there are some schools that are going to have, like, more than 2 people who are really good. Like, what if one school has 4 people, and all 4 people are better than the 2 people from Shadyside? That you don't want an all-state like that. You literally want the best from your state. Just because you're not picking from each school, because that doesn't represent the best of the best. That's why it's a competition. It's all state. That's what that is. And then the other thing is, the coach mentions that there's 11 other girls on the team. All-state swimming is not just going to be the 200 IM. And if these girls are star swimmers, they would be doing other events. So why is the coach just, like, picking the 2 best for this one event? Like, what about the butterfly? Like, the 200 butterfly, the 800 butterfly, or freestyle, or the backstroke, or... This is the IM, but what about, like, the team relay? Like, there's so many different events that she should be working on. And... Maybe
the 2 things cancel out. Maybe the reason there's no regionals is because each school in the region has to select one event, and, and then they can send swimmers to that event only. And so they've already divvied it up like that, and so there's no need to have a regionals. And, for budgetary reasons, you can save a lot of taxpayer money doing it that way.
So this doesn't make sense at all.
Okay, this is a big one. This is, both Anna and I could not figure out for the life of us how this one happened. You can figure out how it could happen, but I guess why it would be done this way doesn't make any sense. So they move the old-fashioned canopy bed out of Maggie's room.
Made with real wood, very sturdy, very big.
Right, and they put it in the attic. I believe it was Mrs. Travers, Mr. Avery, the geriatric from next door, and one of the movers, right? So 3 people do it. The weird thing is that when Maggie needs to go to the attic, she has to, like, pull the cord on one of those pull-down staircases that fall out of the ceiling. You can sort of clamber up into the attic through, like, a trap door. Fine. So they did the thing where they transport the archaeological artifact by, like, sawing it into pieces, carefully labeling them, and then, like, putting them through a 2x8 trap door or whatever. They disassemble the bed somehow. It's the only way it seems to get into the attic. But then, somehow, it is completely reassembled in its full form, and the bed is made, the mattress is put on there, and then all the sheets and the curtains and everything is perfect because, Gina's sleeping in it like she's some kind of, like, queen of ghost bed over there.
He makes a point in saying Andrea pulls the canopy down. So they clearly rebuilt this bed. It's either we're led to believe that A, they didn't take this, maybe I would assume, full to queen size canopy bed, that they didn't take it apart, and they somehow managed to fit it through
teleportation,
a 2x8 opening.
No, but there's 3 people, so
Or that they went through each little thing and took each part off the bed one by one, and then slowly brought up each piece of the bed, and then took the time to put it all back together again in this small, cramped attic space.
And let's just remind our listeners for a second that this is supposed to be an antique piece of furniture. This is not a bed you got from IKEA. A lot of us have probably had that IKEA piece of furniture, and sure, you can disassemble it. I moved recently, like a few years ago, and I had a bed that I got from IKEA, go figure, and yeah, it wouldn't fit through the door, but guess what? I could disassemble it and then easily enough reassemble it at the new place. This isn't what we're talking about here. This is one of those old-timey beds where it fits together like a freaking jigsaw and is probably glued rather than screwed together with easy-to-disassemble fittings. Yeah.
While we're still on the topic of this bed, where did the bed come from? They say the bed was left there by the previous owners. Okay, the girls had already been to the house and picked out their rooms. Like, they went through the house, they went to each room and went, this is the room I want, this is the room I want. The house is empty at this point.
Yes.
Did Gina bring the bed from the attic and build it in this room? Because they are genuinely surprised that this bed exists here. They've been here, or they were there like a few days previously, picking out the rooms of this empty house, and suddenly there's a bed there.
Going back to the kind of interdimensional parallel timeline theory that we were just discussing, it could be that Gina, the Averys, and the bed transported over from the parallel dimension. This is a puzzle of a book. This is like, you get to one stage of the puzzle and you think you figured it out, and that's just when you get to the next part and you see, wait a second, that doesn't fit. And then it just keeps going deeper and deeper. It's a rabbit hole. This is one rabbit hole of a book. Because here we are now in Nitpicks and we're still talking about
I think we're just
mythos.
puzzled.
Yeah.
I think we're just scratching our head going, I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's either like a really, really poorly written, ill-conceived book, or...
He is playing 3D chess and we are just lost.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been talking about the bus up till now, but what about the bed? That other B word that is so puzzling right now.
I am puzzled to the point where I just wanted, how many beds would you give this book then?
Just as long as we're talking about the final thoughts on the book. I'll go back to how many beds I want to give it later on, but I did want to mention one more thing. At the beginning of this book, and coming at it from having just read The Dare, there's that part in the opening that talks about Andrea's struggle of, she used to be that really bitchy girl that would look down on the poor kids and be in a very exclusive clique of only rich girls that lived in North Hills. And now she's getting kicked to the curb and like she has to go live in a less expensive house in a cheaper neighborhood. I thought it was going to go in a different direction. I thought it was going to be a cautionary tale of, you never know how your circumstances are going to change. So, try to be nice. Don't be mean to people just because of the circumstances they find themselves in, especially when you're a kid. It's more to do with your parents' situation than your own, or who you are, or who you're going to be. And you never know what's going to happen to you or what's going to happen to the person that you're interacting with. So I thought that was going to be a lesson. Maybe that was going to be the theme of the book. And it totally took a completely different turn into this batshit bed bus universe, and I never saw that coming. I just want to pay a little homage to where this book could have gone, and that could have been an interesting book for a kid to read, that maybe they could have learned something about not being judgmental, I guess. I don't know. It definitely went in a direction I did not expect. Although, I guess as soon as we saw that Dawn Rogers was making a comeback, we probably should have seen this coming. With that being said, Anna, why don't you go first and let me know how many beds out of 5 you'd give this one?
I would have loved it if he had leaned in more to the supernatural elements. I feel like Fear Street is at its best when he fully takes you on this supernatural trip. And we had the dreams, and I wish he had just gone further with the dreams. Did I want a moral lesson? Maybe, maybe not. It's always good when he has like a hidden thing, like The Dare had this whole thing about classism and wealth inequality and all that. This book, you're right, the whole thing with Andrea would have been interesting. Or the whole feuding sisters is always interesting to look at as well. But I just wish he had like really gone into the supernatural and had them maybe come together with the supernatural, because I felt like this was one of those books that has so many ideas that he wants to throw in there. Like he wants to have the swim thing, he wants to have this previous murder thing, which I said the previous owners of the house sister storyline would have been interesting enough, would have been a great book on its own. The swimming thing is not an interesting book on its own, so he obviously wanted to have a story with that, and having the feuding sisters and the thing and all the injuries happening are interesting, and then having the nightmares, and it just didn't come together for me. When we were watching a Try Guys video and they were making pie, and one of the things that one of the judges for that competition that they had said was, this would have been a really great pie had all the flavors come together, but they ultimately didn't. And I feel like there are a lot of elements to this, and they just did not come together, and I don't think it fit. And I do think it's a storyline we've like seen before, just in a different way.
Yeah.
And the fact that he reused the same characters.
If I can just interject, I believe the cave excursion scene was the gravy flavor in the pecan pie.
Yes. I think it was the dog food flavor. The cave, it was just filling up space. And I feel like maybe that cave scene would have been good in another book. And maybe it would have fit in with another book. But it didn't fit in this book. I really wish he would have just leaned in more to the supernatural and given us more Gus, because I was here for Gus.
Yeah, as soon as I saw Gus in this book, I knew you were going to love it, because it had like a big dog part.
He, honestly, is my favorite Fear Street character of all time. He's the cutest dog. He didn't die.
Can we talk about Gus? I feel like we haven't talked enough about Gus.
We need to talk about Gus the Golden Retriever.
The other thing that we were puzzled by is like, okay, how does Gina get away with sneaking food from downstairs if Gus is in the house all the time? And we figured out that maybe she sneaks him some treats to, get him to like her, which is simple enough. He probably isn't going to hate her if she feeds him a little bit. She sneaks some food from the fridge, shares like 10% time with him. That's the hush money. But we talked about that. But then later on, I had a thought. Wait a second. Gus is also a dog, and hush money doesn't work with dogs. When you give a dog food, they're going to think, oh, okay, I can get food from this person. So now Gus is going to try to go back to her for more food. What would happen is that Gus would be standing by the trap door all the time, making noises, trying to get her to give him more food. Okay, yeah, maybe he's not gonna completely sell her down the river and bark and give her presents away to the rest of the family, but he is going to beg her for food. I feel like he would have still kind of given her away a little bit, don't you think?
I don't know, because my brother does give Hammond food, but he doesn't go beg my brother. He kind of just goes, oh, you're here? You're going to give me food? That's good.
So it's one of those, he acknowledges her presence.
And
she's paid the toll, and, she can pass freely.
Yeah.
Could be. You're right.
But there's, so many good scenes where, the girls are arguing, then Gus will bark, and the mom will be like, Gus knows that you guys are just arguing for no reason. He's such a smart boy. He wants you to stop. Or she'd be like, yes, Gus, I know. They're at it again. How obnoxious. And it's just Gus is just perfect.
Gus is also, a good name for, a sweet-hearted, simple, fuzzy dog.
What a good boy.
With that in mind, how many beds out of 5 would you give this one?
2.
2 beds?
I think it's a 1.5 rounds to 2, because it's a pretty shit book, and I think it only gets its 2 because of Gus.
So definitely also, again, a 2 for me, amazingly enough. And I think Gus was a big part of it. I think the other part of it was the other thing we mentioned earlier, which is, I'm not sure if this is some kind of R.L. Stine 3D chess where he's really coming at us hard with this deep mythos, or if he just really, really sucks or doesn't care and is just recycling some characters in a way that makes absolutely no sense because they were already seniors, now they're seniors again. And this is not an anime where you can come back from a chest wound and go swimming a week later. I mean, give me a frickin' break.
I think it's a season-ending injury. But if you look at the timeline, prom takes place at the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
But she still would have had a broken arm by the time prom came around.
Yeah. And the thing is, prom queen takes place
before, it has to take place.
It takes place over the entire course of the school year. It would almost be concurrent, right?
No, it didn't. It took place in prom season, which is the end of the year.
Yeah.
But it has to take place before this book because of the Justin situation.
Yes. So the mind is boggled. I'll give it 2 just because the razzle and the dazzle confuse me to the point where I'm not sure I can really ding it for any of the things I really should be dinging it for. And the dog was cute. Again, going back to, is this a good place to start reading Fear Street books? It's generally representative of what you're going to get. So it's not a terrible place to start. There's a lot of bus going on, but there's a lot of bus going on pretty much everywhere. Yeah. So that's it. 2 beds out of 5 for me. Still better than the Fear Street saga.
Do you know that apparently Fear Street saga is the thing that R.L. Stine is most proud of from Fear Street? He thinks it's his most gruesome books and his best written books. And they're his favorite.
I guess he's entered that stage where he's just a sad old man and we must pity him because it's not even close to his best writing in the Fear Street series. And the first book was okay. And then the second 2 just went absolutely nowhere. It's just a story of disappointment and missed opportunities.
Well, speaking of a story of resentment and missed opportunities, the next book in the series is Fear Street Double Date. 2's company, but 3 can be murder.
What?
What's interesting is that it says free temporary tattoos inside. I just did a flip through the book, and this library copy does not have the temporary tattoos from 1994, so I'm a little upset.
It's probably been read by 100 people since they got the book. Listeners, if anybody has a mint copy of Double Date complete with the temporary tattoos, please feel free to mail it directly to us here at Rhett Reed Studios.
Or just take a picture of the tattoos, because I'm really curious what kind of tattoos they would include in a Fear Street book. There's 3 characters on the cover of this book, and it's 2 girls and a guy. And one of the girls actually has a butterfly tattoo on her shoulder. And I'm thinking, would this Fear Street book include a temporary tattoo of a butterfly to represent the tattoo this girl has? But then, would you expect Fear Street Street to have a butterfly tattoo in its book?
It's a pretty common tattoo. I think a lot of people have butterfly tattoos.
I know, but for a Fear Street book, wouldn't you expect something like a bus?
Cat bus.
That is too good. That writing is too good for Fear Street. Do not lower Totoro. But like I said, a guy and a girl, they're sitting on a bench and they're sort of like leaning into each other, lovey-dovey. But behind them is this girl with RBF, with her arms crossed, just staring down at them like, excuse me.
This sounds like a pretty risque storyline over here.
So I think it's a book about a double date.
You think?
Some of the titles don't even match like what's happening in the book, so I don't know.
So you're going out on a limb is what you're saying.
I'm gonna say it's a double date. So there's a new girl in town, and she has fallen in love for a guy that she has seen, and he's beautiful and gorgeous. And she's at one point she's gonna say he's so good looking because that's how girls in Fear Street talk. It's abnormal.
Ooh.
She is going to try to go on a date with him, but then she's gonna like make a friend that's a girl, and then they're gonna double date with this guy and one of his friends, but something's gonna go wrong because maybe the other girl likes the guy she's with, or the other guy likes her. So it's like, even though it's a double date, there's still like a love triangle involved. That's why like 3 can be murder. That's what I think the plot is. It's like a weird love triangle in this double date. And I'm gonna say the murder weapon, I'll say knife again.
Okay.
And I'll say the murder victim is a girl.
Okay.
And the murderer is also a girl.
So I'm going to agree with you. I think the murderer is a girl and the murder victim is also a girl. And here's why. I think he's going to recycle the storyline of the new boy. Because why not? He's just recycling book plots already, right? So we're going to have the same idea. It's going to be a love triangle. There's going to be the girl that used to like the boy, and now the boy's dating the new girl that he's dating. The girl that he used to be dating or that used to like turns out to be a crazy psychopath. So murder weapon, I'm going to say fire. Because guess what? He's just going to completely rip off that book plot. So murderer weapon, fire. Murderer female, murder victim female. Love triangle. You get the idea. All right.
I think we've closed the bus doors on our predictions.
All right. Next stop, Fear Street Double Date.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Rhett Read Podcast.
Join us again as we continue our journey down Fear Street.
We love hearing from you guys, so feel free to reach out to us at Rhett Read Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Email us at rhett.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe.
Once again, thanks for listening. See you again soon.